Welcome back to another episode of Getting Unstuck with Misfits Unplugged, where we cover the journeys of career rebels who have overcome challenges, blazed their own paths, and are winning. Today, our special guest is Miss Lakendra Ford, who is a longtime friend and colleague of mine, but a business guru all in her own right. Lakendra is the owner of Encore Renovations, LLC. She's a licensed realtor, certified designer, and home stager. She's the author of Amazing Ways that you can catch on Amazon and all that good stuff. I'm sure she will plug her books and stuff later. She is the host of her own podcast, Transparent with Lakendra Ford, where she does interviews, not interviews. Lakendra, welcome, and thank you for
Welcome.
being a guest. So listen, I'm just going to give just that was the formal sort of bio, but I'm going to give people just a little bit of a chronological order. So I met Lakendra back in my music days. I ain't going to say our ages, but it was a long time ago. And she was a signed writer and singer. She has done plenty of music and albums. She's ghostwritten for some people that we all know. And one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on here is because since then she has had so many different careers and jobs that all kind of like point back to who she is authentically. And we want to have people on here who are blazing their own paths and who are able to tell their story in a way that is authentic. When I met you, you were signed to a record label. I know that you were writing for a bunch of people. You ended up on somebody's choir that went on a national tour. She ended up being on Oprah back in the days when she was giving out cars and shit. And then she somehow developed a career in sales. And I always said that you had a great personality. I always admired that about you. She went into luxury sales and management in that realm. And now she's a wife, she's a mom, and she's opened up her own real estate company, which you'll tell us a little bit about that. And I'm just curious. I mean, my first question of the podcast is, how did you do it all? And how does it all come back to Lakendra?
Hey. Well, thank you for such a wonderful introduction. It feels like you love me.
Just a little bit, just a little bit.
Well, thank you for having me on. This is our second time sitting with each other, and I feel so blessed to be part of your platform and with your listeners as well. But to your point, yes, Brandy, we go back. We go. Listen, I have to give it away. Like, this was my rebel friend that, I mean, she was just fly all the time. She could sing, write, she could do everything. And then, even at the same time, she was about her business. I've learned so much. And to that point, I've learned from watching you, Brandy, because you balance all. You were in a corporate setting. I remember you working for the real estate company and you running it as if it was your own company, but then go down to the studio and turn into Phoenix more to say. So do it and balancing life that way, it let me know that there was no limitations. There was no limitations. Music has always been my passion and writing was my first love. But once I got into understanding what I really loved about entertaining, I realized I really love people. And that led me into all different doors and communicating. So rather it was through writing or being in front of people doing sales or customer service or, being an international performer. It's all the same. Communication, it's all the same.
Well, so can you tell us a little bit about because we talk a lot about transferable skills and that's not just relative to, hopping from one corporate job to another, but really when you start pivoting into different careers, we know that we bring ourselves into each one of those situations. So what would you say one or two of your assets that we call that you're able to kind of move through all of these industries and still be Lakendra and find success strategically?
Well, what I would say is one of the best assets I have is my flexibility. When I'm not a person that's kind of likes to be boxed in, So anytime I get an idea or some unction that something I want to learn about or discover or be a part of, I'm not scared of letting go the image of who I thought I was in order to learn something new.
Mm.
You know, because that's a trap. Sometimes we, like, say for instance, being in entertainment, it was really, really hard to work a 9 to 5 and then go hang out with celebrities at night. It really,
Yeah, I know.
yeah. I know. You know, to these people, but they didn't know Lakendra. They knew La, right?
Mhm,
So at a point where, as an artist, when I discovered, okay, it's a glamorous lifestyle, but until those checks start rolling the right way, you really need to get a job. What would I do if I worked for someone else? So using the same techniques I used in music as far as networking, dealing with people in music, we always had to sell ourselves. Every new is, you know, you're an independent contractor. Every time you go into for another writing bid or another company's entertaining, you know, having you come aboard for development or anything they want for their artists, you have to sell yourself every single time. You can't rest on your laurels. It's not like a 9 to 5 where someone reads your resume and that's all. You pretty
mhm.
much have and be present. So I transferred that same skill set that I use in my artist world into going into sales and corporate afterwards.
Like you mentioned, we had the pleasure of joining you on your podcast, which was more about interviews. So I kind of want to go full circle. What was kind of some pivotal moments in the beginning of your career and that led you on the path to this kind of serial entrepreneur, creative person that you are today?
That's a good question. So okay, can I set this up? Is this Misfits? So can I set this up so people can understand a little bit more about what
Absolutely.
I
This is all about you.
Mhm.
okay. I'm off the cuff. If your listeners don't know, they'll know now. Right. So I'm beautiful story, right? So the beautiful story is this young man from Nashville and this young witty woman from Brooklyn. They meet in Los Angeles, right? They meet in Los Angeles and they live there and they fall in love. And both of them being from different places. My mom coming from the entertainment field because there was a show called Good Times that some of you may be familiar with. She was out there with her best friend, who she acknowledges as her sister. They would call each other for the show because she was an actress in that show. And my dad was there because he was the popo. So when they met with the challenge, and this is, I want y'all to remember this because it's going to make a lot of sense as we continue to speak. They met on a challenge. The challenge was my mom lived in this house, the Arlington Mansion. If anyone's from LA, they probably know that used to be the it spot for upcoming actresses and so forth, right? And my dad was doing security. He challenged my mom. He didn't want to let her in. He didn't know she was a part of the house. But after he saw who she was, he challenged her. He challenged her and said, I bet you, it was Saturday night. He said, I bet you won't get up and go to church with me in the morning. And my mom, being a rebel, Brandy could attest to this. She took that challenge. She partied all night and got up to go to church. And 2 months later, they were married. And a year and so later, I came into. So that was the beginning of the story. But I set that up to so you can understand the extremes of my life. It started out, you know, in a beautiful setting, but after being a product, they got divorced, and I moved to Brooklyn. That's when life got more challenging for me, and it's because of the challenges that I went through in my youth that shaped me up for my career. One of the things of being dropped from living in the suburbs into living in the projects, you have to be flexible. You're around an ever-changing environment that's very heavy, even for the young people. You know, so I had to learn how to move what they would call moving in a room full of vultures. You ever heard that term?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, when you have thousands of people that live in one small neighborhood together, you have to find your place. You have to find what makes you an individual. It's very easy to step outside your door and you have to prove yourself. And some days you don't, if you don't do it well, you won't survive, right? Even
Mhm.
a child. So, with me coming from that type of background of never knowing what was outside, I developed this feeling of what you would call, I got this from you, from Misfits, an avatar. It wasn't a term then, but now I understand. I created an avatar of who I wanted to represent myself as. And I wasn't the pretty one. I wasn't the strongest one that knew how to fight. I had to find my niche, and that niche was being kind, the giver, the person who would hang with anyone in the neighborhood that would let me. And I never allowed myself to just get stuck with one crew of people, so to say. And how that worked for me in building my career is I know how to move in different rooms, right? I know how and I know how to get into other people and what they might expect of me. See, and that comes with sales as well. You know, a lot of people think when they're in business and you have a product, you're just about pushing your own product. No, sometimes it's best to learn the consumer, right? Know what these people expect from you. If I take it back into my childhood, the person who was getting bullied expected me to be compassionate and have their back, right? Or the person who was being bullied was tired of being misunderstood. So I gave them a way to express themselves that was less harsh. So I found my place and value in my community, and that transferred into how I do business, no matter which room I'm in.
I hear it as you transform this protective like armor that you created to and I grew up in New York too, so I understand mine was more the humor to kind of like protect myself. And then you change that protective armor to help you with your survival to now being your hustle, how you're thriving in your life, you know. So now that is your motivation. You're using all of these things that you learned to survive and you're turning them into those transferable skills that Brandy was mentioning. I think that entire survival, that fight or flight mentality is success. It's if you can change that like sad or the challenge into something positive, which in my experience of you, I don't know you from years ago like Brandy does, but I know you now and I see the positivity. I see how you're digging deep into other people to do the same thing we're doing in this conversation, highlight you for all of the 360 that you are. So I admire everything you just shared. So I know that that's not easy, but it's a beautiful story.
So I want to shift it a little bit just because I want to make sure that our listeners are getting some nuggets that they can possibly either see themselves in you or take away some strategic nuggets based off of where they are. And I always say that you lead with your personality. I think that that's true about you and Isabel. I don't know that I have one. I think I'm, but but I kind of want to just kind of piggyback off of what we just talked about, because you talked about, coming into a beautiful place, being dropped off in such a rough place, and how that, sort of set the tone for how you operate in career. So can you tell us a little bit about how that worked for you in one of the setbacks in your career? Like, tell us a little bit about one of the setbacks or a major setback that you had in your career where that avatar really, really helped you be strategic.
Well, I would have to say if I transferred anything from my upbringing, one of the things I didn't mention a lot is I moved around a whole lot in life. And that also helped with my flexibility. At the time, it was not desirable. It feels like you never have home, right? But how it became a blessing for me is because I began to make myself comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that will lead me to a period of my life when I was making another transition, but this time at my own recognizance. I wanted to do something different, and I actually moved from New York to Atlanta, where I'm presently at. That was a bold challenge. I was leaving in a management, well-paying job. No matter of fact, I moved directly from Connecticut. I left a well-paying job. Had a little bit of some management rank, and someone called me with an opportunity. And of course, I move safe in most situations. I try to at least, but I was like, I have to go for this. This was in entertainment. This was in PR. They said, well, hey, you have 2 weeks to make your decision. To come here and accept this position in Atlanta. Mind you, I knew nothing about the South. I had that moment where I had to decide, was I going to stick with what was safe? Because I had worked hard to get into that position? Or was I going to take a chance and bet on myself and go to the unknown? Right. So I took that chance to bet on myself. Right. And I came here to Atlanta, and several months I worked with that company that brought me here. But after that, it was nothing. So now I've sacrificed the career I had. I'm in a whole nother direction that doesn't build on the resume that I had started. And I'm sitting in a place where I didn't really know anyone, right? Because I pretty much worked in hotel for several months. And I questioned myself at that time. I said, how could you let go of a bird in the hand for 10 in the bush? Right. And that was a setback in my life, because I always said stability was, if stability is your goal, why did you make this gamble? Why did you take this gamble? Now I look back, it was the best choice I had ever made. It set me up. You couldn't tell me that then. I'm gonna be honest with you. I was like, oh, God, I waited all this long to be nothing. Everybody, it's like I was a foreign creature. I have this heavy Brooklyn accent. Everybody, I go on McDonald's, they're like, you're not from here. I'm like, does everybody know I'm not from here? And for the time when you are pretty much like almost homeless, it's like, okay, this is up. I can't afford to keep staying at this stay suite, this hotel. It's either I'm going to go with my tail between my legs back up north to start again from scratch, or I'm going to make this work. I almost was, and I was looking at McDonald's like an option. I hear how I'm new lot. That's another thing. Sometimes that image of what you believe people perceive you as. It was like, okay, I gotta survive, I gotta eat. Right. So hold on to the image of La, who's wrote for this person, that person, or this position, or do I survive? And I said, you know what? Before I go back and admit defeat, I will take the bottom of the bottom to climb myself out of this. And that's what I did. I went and worked for a restaurant as a hostess for the first time in my life. I don't even, I didn't know anything about the industry. And to some who would have known me, that would have been a major like setback. But I have that type of pride that would stop me from going forward with my vision. Right. Because when I was there and I decided, I said, oh, I'm not good for working for people. That's when I started thinking like, okay, you got to stay on this entrepreneurial, because giving all your time to these people for basically pennies, being exhausted, stressed out, under pressure, I realized that wasn't good for me. A person who loves to be around people and feel happy. I said, no, I have to defeat this and move forward. And that's what I did. Sorry to be long-winded, but I think somebody may hear this and understand, because somebody may have been facing that time. They're saying, why do I feel like I'm going backwards? And that's the type of slingshot type of life I've lived. Sometimes you have to have the tension to pull you back in order for you to propel the furthest that you're going to do. And that was my setback. That was my setup.
There was so many nuggets that I was taking from there. First of all, I've been hearing a lot more recently about, what is it? Your perception is like my reality, and how incorrect that is, right? So it's my perception, it's my reality. And instead of listening to other people and what their opinions and thoughts are you and the decisions you're making, you have to find out what makes you happy. And if it is taking a step back, Brandy and I have this discussion all the time, because we're growing corporate careers at the same time as being entrepreneurs. So, balancing act of that, what's the right decisions? What strategic should we take a step back career-wise to grow? Misfits should be, the mom stuff that we have and we're juggling, and that kind of regrets of time and energy. So I hear everything that you're saying, and absolutely, just even us on here can resonate to your story. In line to what Brandy was saying about the setback, so I want to know about the comeback. So what, after you had all of those challenges, and you said, okay, here's all of we call them the destroyers out of the ABCDs. You had all of these things holding you back. When did you, or what was the pivotal moment that you said, okay, now I have opportunities. Now I'm turning this McDonald's or hostess and all of this stuff that you didn't want to do. And now you're propelling.
I think it came with an encounter. It was an encounter that I had with a elder gentleman who was a customer. This is when I also worked for Tiffany's, y'all. I believe me, I did a million things at one time. I promise, but it all adds up to something. And this man came in. It's probably the third time I've seen him. And right at that time that I was like, I'm really tired of this life, of not being able to control my schedule, not being exhausted. I went down to a size 0 because I was a caregiver and working and doing entertainment at the same time. And he looked at me one day and he had this funny look on his face. So I said, "Are you okay today?" He said, "I'm tired of seeing you." I thought we was cool. Like, he was a good customer. I had to ask him, "But what's going on? Why?" My salesy type of way. "Why? Is everything okay?" And he said, "No, everything is not okay. Because every time that I walk in here, I hope that you are not here." And I said, "Okay, do you want me to help you find someone else that's better to suit you, what you need?" He said, "No. The problem is you're bigger than this place. You're so talented. You make people feel good. Everybody feels your impact in here. You told me last time that you had a book you wanted to put out. You said that you wanted to be writing all this stuff in Hollywood, and that's what brought you to Georgia. But yet you're still here." My eyes are getting warm because I haven't gone back to that memory in a while. But like I said, that was an encounter that I think that God sent through the most unlikely person. And I respected him. He was like, it's so ironic. I wasn't in real estate at the time, but he was huge in real estate. I went home. I do remember going home and I did not. You ever had that time when you home, but you won't walk in your door,
All the time, and I don't have my kid, and
Right.
and,
That for like, I felt like hours, but it probably was only like 30 minutes in the car. And I was just like, why am I doing this? Yes, I love it, but I didn't come to Georgia for this life. I'm fading away, becoming less of me and more of this avatar that I created to survive. I got to make a decision. Either I'm going to survive or I'm going to thrive.
Mhm.
It don't take this old man to see me more than I saw myself. It should have took me knowing that I deserved it. I should have had enough faith to move forward. But like I said, that time that we have that reflection and that encounter together, it made me start to put things on paper and hold myself accountable. So that's pretty much when that's those setbacks and that time that I realized my transition was coming. And immediately after that, I made a promise that I would not just go to work and come home and go to work and come home. I was going to put myself, before I was just doing music when I was called. Now I was going to put myself out there on the scene, whether y'all liked it or not.
Mhm.
And I made myself available for people to meet me. I made myself available to start to sell my truth, who I really was, in this beautiful state of Georgia.
I want to segue from the conversation that we were just having because it sounds like part of your comeback was you setting specific goals for yourself. And Isabel and I are crazy with that. It's probably one of the things that we enjoy the most about what we do when we're working with clients and mentees, because a lot of it is ideas, 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 but how do you get to the next level? Sometimes you got to see it on paper. So I'm curious to know, like, what was your process in terms of actually setting goals, and what goals did you set for yourself long term that you've met that now you feel great about?
Okay, taking it back to that time where I decided I needed to put it on paper. The number one thing I found the challenge in was designating time for myself. Right? Designating time for myself. So if I knew that I was not walking in the door from till 6:30, 7 o'clock in the evening, I had to figure out a way that I can find time to network, find time to build out a plan for my career or what I
Mhm.
next step. So I had to say, listen, nobody bother me until 10 o'clock. I'm
Mhm.
home. I had to decompress. I had to get back into, I started playing music and going back into who I was before I got into this real survival mode, right?
Mhm.
Started to, instead now when I went to work, before I left work, I already had somewhere to go before I got home. That's something that was major for me to change because I was like, I had to get home at a certain time. No, if it was going to somewhere that people were going to be networking, if it was asking, here's another thing, especially in a new place, right? I had to say, I don't know where to go. And I didn't know, but I was keeping my mouth closed and not asking people until I got to the point where, listen, where's everybody at out here in Georgia?
Mhm.
Like what's the setting that I can be around these type of people to introduce them to different ideas that I have. And once people's like, well, I've heard of this place, I've heard of this place, I put that on my list. I'm going to go to these places, and sometimes it's going to be by myself, and I'm going to have to be okay with that. And
Mhm.
it's actually a good thing for me because going places by myself, which I wasn't accustomed to, because I will always drag somebody along with me, it
Mhm.
forced have to engage and meet people there, or it made me look more welcoming. And that's how I started to build up my network with people seeing, oh, so what brings you by? And I said,
Mhm.
I'm here and I have a mission, and that's what I started to do, just meet people and start to put out some of the things that I've done along with what I'm planning on doing and seeing what doors I was guided into.
So we all started off in some path in life, and you got to where you are today, where you're sharing your knowledge and expertise as a career rebel who is winning. But if you can go back and talk to your either younger yourself or who you were, the Lakendra starting your journey, what advice would you give her? We're challenging you to keep digging deep.
Yeah, well, the first thing I would tell my younger self is you are enough. I would tell myself that it's okay if people don't see the vision that you have. Just keep going. It's going to make sense in the end. And I say that, and can I give you a little backstory of why I said that?
Mhm.
Um, and in my youth, I'll put like this: before I was age 30, I probably lived in 30 different places. I've probably seen about 6 to 7 murders. Seen people suffer, and I was scared. I used creativity to escape that. The ugly duckling needed somewhere to be seen. So I created my own world. And sometimes in that own world, it can be a lonely place. So if I was talking to that little girl that had to create that world in order to not get stuck in my environment and the things I was experiencing, I would tell myself that you're strong, that things will change, just have some patience, and don't become invisible. I
Mhm.
think would be what the younger version of myself, would have needed to hear.
Mhm.
And I think how I probably told myself that because as I'm saying it, that's exactly the things that I fought forever. You will not be invisible. Even if other people don't see your vision, you see it, keep moving forward. And it does not have to be, don't get stuck in the finish line, get into the finish line. Appreciate your process. Appreciate your process. So when life shows you ugliness, like the things that I've seen or experienced, um, you have to believe further than what your eyes can see. And if I didn't sit in the projects on the fifth floor, looking out the windows, if I look down, I might see somebody get shot. But as long as I kept looking up, I can see new possibilities. And I dreamt myself out of that place. And that took me around the world. And that was
Mhm.
not what that girl was supposed to do. Not in front of you. Sometimes you can't look in front of you. You have to just look up, rather that's your power source, your God source, your spiritual source, your vision, your imagination. Just keep looking up and don't be invisible, not even to yourself.
I think you just gave me like 10 weeks worth of quotes and content. Thank you very much.
And we see you.
We do. Well, so tell our listeners where they can find you.
Okay, so that I don't know. We really didn't get into much of my business besides what you introduced, but for if you're in the Georgia, Alabama region and you're looking for home renovations, you can always contact me on www.encorerenovations.com. If you're into entertainment, if you want to just follow what I do, you can check me out on IG. I do have a personal page there, and that's MS Lakendra Ford. Or if you want to know more about my book, Amazing Ways, or music, you can go to www.lakendraford.com.
And I'll include all of this information in this episode's description so that everyone has all of your information to get in contact with you.
Oh, awesome. One last thing I forgot, because I do a lot of stuff. Right?
Mhm.
If you are moving to the Georgia region and you're looking for a home, rather you want to fix it or flip it, I'm the person to, well, I'm going to say we, because hubby and I are partners and teams in this, but we are the ones who we can, from purchasing the house to even if it's a rehab to selling your home, everything, one-stop shop. We get it done.
I love it. Good. Thanks so much, Career Rebel,
Thank
for
for coming and joining us.